to stay in this country. It already was reported today that they will come after people who are homegrowns, people who were born here, people who have citizenship. They've already floated the idea of revoking people's citizenship. So for the people you talk to that you mentioned that, you know, this may not apply to me, I guarantee you there will be something that applies to you. And if people are being sent to El Salvador, to these prisons, as it was talked about in World War II, without due process, what is that? That is essentially sending people to internment camps. And again, what we did in World War II.
Abel said Garcia is not a choir boy. He is not coming back, and his problem is now El Salvador's. A man was sent to a foreign prison without a court hearing. The Supreme Court ordered his return. The administration refused. The conservative defense. He probably deserved it. Move on. Tiffany Cross asked the question this panel needed. How will history remember the people who defended this? Let's get into it.
In the case of Harvard University and the IRS laws and their tax-exempt status, all of this is pressure against the system to try to see if they could break it.
Which is very terrifying. And I have to say, even outside the legalese of this, it is just terrifying to us as human beings. I don't think this is an issue, a political issue. I don't think this is an issue where we can have, you know, well, this side says this and this side says this one. We have to look at if he's not a citizen and he's not afforded due process, then none of us are citizens. What is to stop this administration from me walking out of this studio tonight and me saying something that they don't like and them grabbing me and saying, well, you're not a citizen? Well, how do you know? Because I've not been afforded due process. What is stopping them from deporting me into this El Salvador prison where there are thousands of people locked up without due process? Our own State Department warned about Bukele, the president of El Salvador, negotiating with gangs, doing nefarious things there. And so the fact that we're sitting back allowing this to happen and discussing this as though it's a political issue, this is a humanitarian issue. And when you look at the habits of dictators, when you look at the behavior of Orban, when you look at the behavior of Erdogan in Turkey, when you look at the behavior of Putin, they do all these various things. They go after the higher education system. Even Putin said wars are won by teachers. When you look at what Erdogan is doing, cozying up to other dictators, it is frightening, and we're seeing that happen before our very eyes. And to me, it feels like we're in the path of destruction, and I'm watching this storm come through and knock everything out. And for all the people who say, oh, I don't care, that doesn't impact me, guess what? You are in the path of destruction too. We have to stop this and look at this as a humanitarian issue.
I think it is a political issue. I also think it's a national security issue. Prince George's County in 2019, their gang unit determined that Garcia was an MS-13 gang member. His wife in 2021, the wife that's now giving lengthy testimonies about how great he is, said that he's a serial abuser, and she has a ton of photos to showcase said abuse. I agree, due process is absolutely important. We want to maintain that, but I think there's absolutely enough here to send this guy somewhere else. One, he's already broken the law. We've already established that. Now you do have evidence suggesting that he was a member or is a member of MS-13. He's also a serial abuser. This is not the type of individual I don't think any one of us would want in our country. He should be deported.
But respectfully, Sir Michael, we can't make it about Kilmar. Like, that's just one person.
But that's the case we're talking about.
That is, but I guess if we look at the macro and not the micro and just look at the process of this, because he's not the only person there. There were they indiscriminately rounded up people and deported them. We also saw in the news this week, maybe it was last week, it's been a long year this week, but the Massachusetts attorney who got the letter saying that you have 7 days to leave the country. This administration has already proven that there are flaws in this system, and they are randomly deporting people without due process. That's not specific to him. That should be specific to all of us.
We certainly don't want the randomization. Just if I can that's going to happen, that should be corrected. I would certainly agree. But I think the vast majority of the American people, if you look at the polling numbers, this is one of the only areas where Donald Trump maintains a strong support across the board in terms of people wanting a very tough stance on immigration. And I think politically speaking, some of the Democrats that are saying they're going to fly over there, they're making an optical mistake.
So, Mandel, I'll let you get in, but since he brought up the numbers, I just want to show people so we can all be on the same page. Asked whether they oppose deporting undocumented immigrants who are here for a long time and with no criminal records. 33% favor it, 63% oppose it. On the question of whether the administration should send suspected gang members to El Salvador without a court hearing, this is a Wall Street Journal poll, 55% favor it, 43% oppose it. The point being, I think it really depends on what the action is, what Americans support. And I just want to make one note about the gang affiliation. Obviously, this is a police report. We know the police reports are one part of the story. He has in court disputed that because the basis is the clothing he was wearing and information from a confidential informant, not actually
But
direct
it is a relevant piece of
information.
evidence that we should
Yeah,
cite for the viewers.
Just more context on what you were saying.
Let's start with what Abel actually argued, because it deserves to be stated precisely before it is examined. His position was that the immigration system is broken, that Garcia was a mistake who slipped through, that the administration corrected the mistake through an abbreviated administrative proceeding, and that Garcia's situation is now El Salvador's problem rather than America's. That argument sounds procedural. It is not. Stripped to its core, it is this. When the administration decides someone should not be here, the normal legal process that protects that person's rights can be replaced with whatever abbreviated process produces the outcome the administration prefers. And once that outcome is achieved, the courts can order whatever they want. He is not coming back. The Supreme Court ordered the facilitation of Garcia's return. The administration refused. That is not a policy disagreement about immigration enforcement priorities. That is defiance of the highest court in the country.
It was found guilty of sexual assault, as relevant as the fact that Pete Hegseth, his own mother, called into question his integrity, his ability to serve in the position that he's serving in.
What does that have to do with immigration?
Well, what I'm saying is these are the people who are leading the country, not just people who are living in the country.
We had an election,
That's a huge
though,
difference.
Mandela.
So it's okay. So it's fine that our nation is led by a sexual
but the American
assaulter,
people had an
by a
opportunity
man
to decide who
found
they
guilty
wanted to
of
lead,
sexual
and they
assault.
chose
Are
Donald
you okay
Trump
with that?
and not the former vice
You're
president.
fine with a person who's found guilty of sexual assault leading this country? I am certainly not. I fought against that with every fiber of my being. Now, if he got elected, we came up short. But are you comfortable voting for that? Are you comfortable with having that lead this country? But are you comfortable with that leading this country? That is the question.
Let me understand what he's being accused of something. By the way, he's never been convicted of any of those things, right?
Of course.
He's being accused of that. That's enough for you to say, get him out, throw him into a prison in El Salvador. Mandela, what's your point about Trump?
My point is we're talking about due process, and we've gone through due process with Donald Trump, and he was found guilty. And if we could sit and let this man who has all sorts of issues dictate who gets to stay in this country, it already was reported today that they will come after people who are homegrowns, people who were born here, people who have citizenship. They've already floated the idea of revoking people's citizenship. So for the people you talk to that you mentioned that, this may not apply to me, I guarantee you there will be something that applies to you. And if people are being sent to El Salvador, to these prisons, as it was talked about in World War II, without due process, what is that? That is essentially sending people to internment camps. And again, what we did in World War II with the Japanese.
I gotta let him in.
Abby, there's no secret that the immigration system in America is broken. Yes. No secret. Both political parties have done nothing about it over the years. But this man here, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he came here, he filed for political asylum. They didn't give it to him. There was an order for deportation. There was a stay. At the end of the day, the administration made a mistake. They said, we made a mistake, we deported him. Now he has an El Salvador problem. He doesn't have a Trump USA problem. So if this administration wants to do something to facilitate, I think they might give us.
The courts kind of disagree with that because honestly, they could just, as many people,
bring him back.
But as many people have suggested, they could
just
just follow the court order, have him come back, and as they said,
He's not coming back because they're
just
not
go through the
bringing
court
him back.
proceeding and deport him where they can deport him.
By the way,
And Abel's response to that defiance, essentially, good, he should not have been here, is an argument that the administration gets to decide which court orders it complies with based on whether it agrees with the underlying outcome. That is not the rule of law. That is its opposite. Tiffany Cross built her argument from the comparison that the conservative panelists most wanted to avoid. She named Putin. She named Erdogan, not as dramatic rhetoric, but as a documented political science observation. Authoritarian consolidation does not announce itself. It proceeds incrementally. You test the system with one case. When the system does not push back effectively, you test it with another. The population most affected is always chosen carefully. Someone who enough people will decide is not worth fighting for. An undocumented immigrant with alleged gang ties. Someone who, in Abel's words, is not a choir boy. The selection of an unsympathetic target is not incidental to the strategy. It is the strategy. You establish the precedent with someone the public will not rally behind. And then the precedent exists for everyone. Mandel made the extension of that argument that deserves its own attention. The administration has already floated revoking the citizenship of American-born citizens, an idea that would require a constitutional amendment and has no legal basis under current law, but has been stated publicly as a policy aspiration. The conservative panelists at this table were defending the right of the administration to skip due process for an undocumented immigrant. The same administration is separately discussing whether birthright citizenship can be eliminated. Those two conversations are not unrelated. They are the same conversation about who the government decides belongs in what process, if any, protects people the government has decided do not. The hypocrisy argument that Cross and Mandel kept returning to deserves to be named plainly because the panel kept dancing around it. Shermichael and Abel were defending the swift removal of a man based on alleged crimes that were never adjudicated in court, alleged gang affiliation from a 2019 police report, alleged domestic abuse from a civil proceeding, no criminal conviction, no trial, no finding of guilt by any court. And the president, whose administration is denying this man due process, was found civilly liable for sexual assault by a jury and convicted of 34 felonies by a criminal court. That is not a character attack. It is a factual comparison about what level of legal finding the conservative panelists require before concluding someone should face consequences. For Garcia, allegations are enough. For Trump, convictions are irrelevant. The standard is not legal. It is political. Shermichael's appeal to public opinion, that the majority of Americans support tough immigration enforcement, is real as a polling observation and entirely beside the point as a constitutional argument. Majorities have supported unconstitutional things before. That is precisely why constitutional protections exist outside the reach of majority preference. The Bill of Rights is not subject to a popularity vote. Due process is not suspended when 60% of survey respondents think it should be. If the constitutional protection of due process only applies when the public supports it, it is not a constitutional protection. It is a weather vane.
About we have to get a jury impaneled, and we have to go through motions and discovery and all. We're talking about a very abbreviated administrative proceeding. So if you adhere to the immigration laws, you give an ALJ at the immigration board to give that type of process, you're done. It's exactly what you said. We're talking about an abbreviated proceeding. It is
and they
not
could have done
so
that from the beginning.
Right.
Which
So
is interesting to me.
problematic.
But it made me wonder, I mean, truly, from a political perspective, Tiffany, it makes me wonder, because when you look at what the White House did today, they were like, oh, here are the documents that, you know, everyone's been saying, well, what's the proof? Just give us the evidence and let's debate it. They put this out. They brought the mother of someone who was tragically killed by an undocumented immigrant to the White House.
Part of Salvador.
Yeah, this is part of a political strategy.
He wasn't the person.
But the point is that Van Hollen won't talk to the woman here who lost her daughter in Maryland, but he will go down to El Salvador to try to bring an MS-13 gang process back to America?
It is disturbing that you are
I think the Democrat Party is completely lost.
It is disturbing
Completely lost
that you are
and losing it.
defending the lack of due process to have the government disappear people and take them to El Salvador.
How do you think?
That's my point.
Mistake.
They admitted it was a mistake.
This is an MS-13 gangbanger in El Salvador.
The Supreme Court has ordered this administration to bring him back. How do you think
they
history?
Well,
they have said
the facilitation of his
return. Precisely. But my point is, for you and you who are defending this, how do you think history will remember you when we look back at this time?
I did say
that. But you're okay
important.
with him going away. How do you think when we look back at this time, when the government was, but if there wasn't a legal process, is my point. And how do you think when we look back at this time, when the government is disappearing people, and you two sat on this stage and said, oh well, that's okay. They are
very last word,
they're
and then we have to go.
shipping them to another
Tiffany and Shermichael, hang on a second. Let me let Abel get a word in.
What Abel said at the end of this panel, he is not a choir boy. He is not coming back. His problem is now El Salvador's, is worth sitting with not as a conclusion, but as a test. Apply that framework to yourself. Apply it to someone you know. Imagine that allegations, not convictions, not findings, not adjudicated facts, were enough for the government to send someone you care about to a foreign prison. Imagine a Supreme Court order being issued for their return and the administration saying no. Imagine the defense offered on cable news being, they probably deserved it, so move on. The reason due process exists is not to protect choir boys. It is to protect everyone, including the people whose cases are the hardest to defend. Because the alternative is a government that decides who deserves a hearing and who does not. And governments that make that decision have a documented, historical, universal tendency to keep expanding the category of people who do not deserve one. Tiffany Cross asked how history will remember the people who defended this. That is not a rhetorical flourish. It is the right question. The people who built the infrastructure of every authoritarian system in history had defenders at every step who said, this specific person is not a choir boy. This specific action is justified. This specific exception is not worth fighting for. The exceptions accumulate. The infrastructure remains. And at some point, the people who said it was not worth fighting for discover that the infrastructure has been turned toward them. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the courts will ultimately force the administration to comply with the Supreme Court's order on Garcia? And what does the administration's defiance of that order tell you about how it views the role of the judiciary as a check on executive power? Subscribe to the debate, Chaz. We will keep watching every case, every order, and every refusal until the pattern cannot be denied.